I used to think invisibility was a kind of gift, a shield, a quiet corner where no one bothered you, where no expectations pressed against your ribs until you couldn't breathe. But standing there in that glittering hall, squeezed between marble pillars and roses dripping from golden vases, my invisibility felt less like protection and more like a curse carved into my bones from birth. I was 25 years old, and not a single soul noticed I existed. The wedding was the grandest event our kingdom had seen in years. Everyone from minor nobles to ancient alphas lined the walls, shimmering in silks and jewels. Laughter leapt through the air like sparks, bright and loud, the kind of sound that made your ears ring if you weren't part of it. And I wasn't. I never was. I hovered near the edge of the hall, fingers curled tightly around my shawl as bodies flowed past me without a glance. Wolves scented the air, making their presence known, each one dominating a space that seemed to shrink around me. Their auras brushed my skin, sharp, cold, dismissive. They didn't mean to push me aside. They just didn't notice they'd done it. Invisibility is easy when no one knows your name. My sister, of course, was glowing in the center of everything. Lynette, the pride of House Ashwood. Golden-haired, unnervingly poised, a perfect omega bred for alliances. She floated through crowds like a jewel carried by admiring hands. I watched her from across the room as she accepted compliments that should have fallen equally on me if people believed I mattered at all. Our mother hovered near her, beaming with pride. When her gaze passed over me, it was with the same distracted impatience she used on servants. A brief glance, a faint frown, and then her attention snapped right back to Lynette, as if I were a smudge she didn't have the energy to wipe clean. I wasn't hurt by it. Not anymore. You don't bleed after the 1,000th cut. A group of courtiers swept past me, their conversation weaving around me like I was a pillar or a piece of furniture. Did you see Lynette Ashwood tonight? Radiant. She'll secure a match before the week ends. And her sister? A flutter of silence. A soft, careless laugh. Oh, the quiet one? I never remember her name. They kept walking. I stayed still. If I hadn't pressed my back to the wall, one of them would have walked straight through me. It wasn't new. It wasn't even painful. It was normal. That was the worst part. The music swelled, strings and drums echoing through the carved ceiling. Couples spun on the dance floor, gowns swirling like petals. I tried to pretend I wasn't studying them, longing tucked beneath layers of practiced indifference. I'd never danced at an event like this. No one ever asked. Instead, I slipped farther toward the shadows, where the lantern light didn't quite reach. The corner smelled faintly of wax and polished stone. It was quiet there, empty, safe. I sank into it the way some people sank into a lover's arms. I knew I shouldn't hide. My family expected me to stand at Lynette's side, smiling like a decorative vase. But the pressure of being near them was suffocating. Beside her, I was only a reminder of what I wasn't, what I'd never be. Soft-spoken, forgettable. A minor omega from a minor house, born to be unseen. As the bride and groom entered and the crowd erupted in cheers, I felt something inside me settle, a resignation I'd carried for years. This was my place, my role, the overlooked shadow in the corner while the world celebrated itself. I didn't know then that everything would change tonight, that someone would finally see me, really see me, and that the first words he'd ever whisper to me would shatter the quiet life I'd accepted. Stay close. You're with me tonight. Two ancient houses, Silverthorn and Duskmire, were joining through a marriage that had taken 5 years of negotiations, political bribery, and whispered threats to achieve. The chandeliers alone cost more than my family's entire estate, and the flowers were imported from 3 different continents. Gold dripped from every surface. Silk swirled like water. Wolves showed their teeth in polite smiles that never reached their eyes. And in the center of it all, the king himself, Alpha King Kale of the Stormclaw Pack. Even the air tightened when he entered. I didn't have to see him to know when he arrived. The atmosphere changed, like someone had rolled thunder indoors. Deep, quiet, dangerous. Conversations dipped into frantic murmurs. Courtiers straightened their backs as if afraid to be caught doing anything less than perfect. Wolves in high-ranking positions lowered their heads in instinctive submission. I should have looked. Everyone else did. But I kept my eyes on the floor, fingers curling around the pillar beside me, trying to make myself smaller. I didn't belong in rooms like this. Not really. I was only invited because my mother insisted having both daughters present made our family look more complete. Meaning, I was set dressing, a filler piece to round out the background behind my sister. Lynette, of course, was in the center of the hall, shimmering like a gemstone. She wore a pale gold gown fitted so tightly it looked painted on, her hair piled in an elegant cascade of soft curls. She glowed in a way I never could, needing only to exist to draw every eye. Men drifted toward her without thinking, like moths to flame. Meanwhile, I stood against a pillar like a forgotten lantern. A servant passed with a tray of sparkling wine. He paused near a cluster of noble ladies, offered them each a glass, then turned away, never noticing me even though I stood only steps away. My throat tightened in a way I had learned to hide. Of course he didn't see me. People rarely did. A burst of laughter erupted from across the hall, high, bright, delighted. I didn't have to look to know it came from my sister. My mother was beside her, wearing a smile sharp enough to cut. A moment later, their voices drifted toward me. "Lynette, darling, look." My mother's tone dripped with false sympathy. "Your sister is standing there like a ghost." I told her to at least try to make herself appealing. Lynette sighed dramatically. "But no one's going to dance with her. Just look at her." I shouldn't have listened. I should have walked away. But I stayed anchored to the pillar, each word carving into me. "She should have stayed home," my mother continued. "Every time she's here, she lowers your shine." Lynette giggled. "She doesn't lower my shine, Mother. She just, well, doesn't have any of her own." Another ripple of laughter. I kept my face still. That was the secret. Don't react. Don't give them more reason to poke at the wound. I stared at the mosaic floor beneath my slippers, the patterns blurring slightly as I blinked rapidly. Shame is a strange feeling. It doesn't stab. It settles. Quiet, heavy, familiar. Like a cloak you keep meaning to take off but never quite manage to. I lifted my gaze just enough to scan the hall. Everywhere I looked, people shimmered with confidence and purpose, nobles with wine, wolves with their mates, young girls twirling to catch the eye of suitable men. Everyone had a place. Everyone except me. A sudden hush fell, rolling through the hall like a wave. I didn't have to guess why. The Alpha King had moved. He was crossing the ballroom now, tall and lethal in his black ceremonial uniform. Power clung to him like a second skin. His presence was so intense it made the air feel charged, like lightning gathering in a storm cloud. Rumors said he'd ripped a traitor in half with his bare hands. Rumors said he'd killed his own uncle. Rumors said his wolf was uncontrollable, violent, cursed. Rumors said a lot of things. I kept my head down. If he didn't see me, he wouldn't devour me whole. That was the rule. Dangerous men couldn't hurt what they didn't notice. So I tried, desperately, quietly, to be forgettable. Invisible. A shadow beside a pillar. A nobody. My mother's voice drifted toward me again, whispering to someone nearby. She should pray he doesn't look in her direction. A king doesn't want dead weight. Lynette laughed softly. Don't worry, he won't. He only sees people worth seeing. I let their words settle like cold ash. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was nothing more than background noise at the wedding of the century. Maybe the world would never see me. I didn't know then that the Alpha King's eyes had already found me across the hall, and that everything I believed about being invisible was about to shatter. If I had been smarter, I would have walked out the moment my mother and sister turned their backs. But I stayed. Not out of hope, not out of pride, but because I had convinced myself that enduring humiliation with grace was a kind of strength. Now I see it for what it was. A slow, quiet breaking. I kept trying to disappear into the pillar at my back, willing myself to blend into the marble, wishing, just for a moment, that the world would forget I had a body or a name. But the world has a cruel talent for noticing only when it wants to mock. A group of nobles drifted closer, drinks in hand, their voices bright and careless. They stood only a few feet from me, angled toward the dance floor, not sparing me even a moment's glance. I would have been grateful for their disinterest. But I wasn't so lucky. One of them, a tall man with a wolf crest stitched in silver across his chest, leaned toward his companions. "Do you see that girl in the corner?" he said loudly. Heat crawled up my neck. Another noble snorted. "Girl? I thought she was part of the decor." "Ah, yes." The first one added dramatically. "The invisible omega of House Ashwood. A rare species, nearly extinct due to chronic irrelevance." Laughter burst from their group like fireworks. I held perfectly still, nails digging into my palm inside my sleeve. Invisible. Irrelevant. Used to be, those words only bruised. Tonight, they cut deep enough to tear. One of the men took a sip of wine. "I've heard a rumor," he said. "They say House Ashwood hides her because she's cursed." The others leaned in, entertained. "Cursed how?" "Cursed," he said with a shrug, "with absolute mediocrity." More laughter. And then, because humiliation has a way of multiplying, another voice joined the circle, younger, lighter. "Why is she even here? Did someone forget to lock the servant's door?" I didn't look at their faces. I couldn't. If I met their eyes, they might see how close I was to breaking. But then, one of the younger wolves peeled away from the group and walked toward me. For a heartbeat, foolish hope fluttered in my chest. Maybe he was different. Maybe he had overheard the cruelty and felt pity. He stopped in front of me, offering his hand. "Would you like to dance?" My breath caught. I. It felt strange even to be addressed. He tilted his head in polite encouragement. I placed my hand into his, barely believing this sudden kindness. And then he turned his head toward his friends and smirked. They burst into raucous laughter. "Oh," one said loudly, "he's brave, dancing with the invisible girl." "No," the young wolf laughed, dropping my hand like it burned him. "I just wanted to see if she'd actually take it. Stars, she's desperate." The group howled. And just like that, the small, fragile thread of dignity I'd been clinging to snapped. He walked past me and offered his arm to another girl, one radiant, polished, glowing. She took his hand with a bright smile, never even noticing the wreckage he'd left behind. I couldn't breathe. Not here. Not with their laughter echoing in my skull, their sneers tightening around my throat like a rope. I slipped between two groups of nobles, keeping my head down, hoping no one would see the trembling in my fingers. I pushed through a side corridor and into an empty archway leading outside, the cool night air hitting me like a splash of water. Only then did I realize how hard I was shaking. I braced my hands on the stone railing, vision blurring at the edges. My chest ached with something sharp and vicious. Disappointment mixed with humiliation, mixed with something older and deeper. Something that had lived in me since childhood. For a long moment I couldn't breathe without tasting it. Their laughter, my sister's smirk, my mother's sigh, the servant's indifferent glance, the young wolf's mocking grin. It all swirled together until my lungs felt too small to hold anything but shame. I pressed my forehead against the cool stone. "I can't," my voice cracked. "I can't do this." The wind shifted, carrying faint music from the hall behind me. It sounded distant now, muffled, like it belonged to someone else's life, someone brighter, someone worth seeing. My throat tightened, and before I could stop myself, I whispered the words that had sat, unspoken, heavy in my chest for years. "Maybe I'm truly nothing." The silence that followed was suffocating, and for the first time that night, tears slid silently down my cheeks. Not because someone had hurt me, but because their words had finally settled deep enough for me to believe them. At least, for one last moment. I thought stepping onto the balcony would save me. Just a moment of night air, a moment where no one could look at me. Or worse, pretend not to. My chest was tight, my eyes still burning from humiliation I didn't want to admit had landed too deep. I just needed silence, space, somewhere to scrape myself back together before returning to the shadows inside. I pushed through the tall doors expecting emptiness. I was wrong. The balcony wasn't empty at all. He was there, the Alpha King, King Kale of Stormclaw. He stood with his back to me, massive shoulders outlined by moonlight, the fur mantle draped over him moving gently in the wind. Even from behind, he looked like something carved out of myth, too large, too still, too dangerous. The kind of figure poets wrote tragedies about. If I had known he was there, I never would have stepped outside. But I had already moved forward, and the soft click of the door behind me betrayed my presence. He turned, slowly, deliberately. When his eyes found me, the world dropped out from under my feet. It was just a second, a breath, nothing more, and yet I could have sworn time stopped. His eyes were a cold, electric blue at first, then they flared, glowing faintly gold, the unmistakable sign of a wolf reacting to a scent. My scent. His nostrils widened, drawing in the air between us. My heart stopped. He didn't blink. He didn't look away. He stared at me like he had seen a ghost, or maybe a prophecy that had just stepped out of the pages and into his life. A strange, unreadable expression crossed his face. Shock first, then something sharper. Something hungry. Something claiming. My breath tangled in my throat. I did the only thing my instincts allowed me to do. I bowed. Awkwardly. Too fast. Too low. I probably looked ridiculous. Some trembling creature who didn't know what to do with her hands or her dignity. But the sudden weight of his attention was too much, too intense. My knees felt weak. My pulse roared in my ears. "Your Majesty," I whispered, staring at the floor, praying he would simply nod and let me escape. I turned to leave, but a shadow moved, swift and deliberate, and he stepped into my path. My heart jumped painfully. He was close now. Too close. The scent of him. Storm winds, pine, steel, and something darker. Hit me like a physical force. My wolf, long dormant and quiet, shivered awake under my skin, startled by his nearness. I kept my eyes down. I didn't trust myself to look at him again. Then his voice came, low, deep, a growl curled inside velvet. "Don't hide." I froze. I had never heard a voice like that. It wasn't loud, it wasn't cruel. It wasn't even commanding in the way kings usually are. It was something else. Something that brushed the edges of me gently, yet seeped into my bones like warm smoke. I swallowed hard. I'm not hiding, Your Majesty. I was only leaving. He took one step closer. The heat of his body grazed my skin, and I felt it. Felt him. as if every nerve in me had been waiting for that exact moment. "Yes," he murmured, voice soft but unyielding. "You are." My breath shook. I lifted my gaze, just slightly, just enough to see his boots, the heavy black leather carved with wolf insignias, then higher, to his knees. Higher still, to the broad expanse of his chest. But I hesitated before meeting his eyes. It didn't matter. He was already watching me, studying me. His gaze, sharp, molten, intense, fell on my face with a kind of reverence I didn't understand. No one had ever looked at me like that. Like I was something rare, something impossible, something worth stopping a king in his tracks. "Who are you?" he asked softly. My mouth went dry. No one," I stammered. A slow breath escaped him, something between disbelief and irritation. "No," he said, as if arguing with fate itself. "You're not." My heart hammered so violently I thought he might hear it. Everything in me wanted to run, not because he frightened me, though he did, but because his attention burned too brightly, too suddenly. After a lifetime of being overlooked, I didn't know what to do with being seen. Truly seen. My instincts took over. "I should go," I whispered. And before he could answer, before he could step closer or say something else that might unravel me entirely, I fled. I didn't look back, but I felt it. The weight of his stare following me into the hall. The pull in my chest that wasn't fear at all. Something had shifted. Something dangerous. Something I didn't dare understand yet. I should have gone home. After running from the balcony, after the Alpha King's voice slipped under my skin like warm smoke, after the way he looked at me, as if I were something impossible, I should have found the nearest exit and fled the palace. But my family was inside, and House Ashwood needed both daughters present, even if one was only ornamental. So I forced myself back through the tall doors into the glittering, roaring noise of the wedding feast. The hall had shifted into its second act, music louder, courtiers drunker, wolves showing their teeth in smiles that meant more than smiles should. Servants carried trays of wine and decadent food. Laughter floated above everything like glittering dust. And I was once again standing alone beside a pillar, exactly where I'd been before. As if no one had noticed I'd left. As if nothing had happened outside. My chest felt hollow. Every part of me ached from holding myself together. I wrapped my shawl tighter around my arms and tried to disappear into the shadow the pillar offered. People brushed past without seeing me. Servants carried wine past without stopping. My sister's bright, ringing laugh rose above the orchestra, each note a reminder of how easily she belonged here, how easily I didn't. The humiliation from earlier clung to my skin like smoke. I kept telling myself to breathe, to stay calm, to ignore the sting in my eyes. Then the hall shifted. I didn't notice it at first. Just a sudden quieting, the faintest dip in conversation, the kind of hush that sweeps through a room when a predator enters. A shadow fell across me, large, heavy, blocking out the chandelier light. I looked up and forgot how to breathe. The Alpha King stood beside me. Standing this close to him felt like standing beside a storm. Every part of him radiated power, contained, restrained, but barely. His aura pressed against me like heated air before a lightning strike. His cloak brushed the floor, black fur draped over shoulders made for war, not court dances. I froze. Why was he here? Why was he next to me? His eyes, icy blue, threaded faintly with gold, traveled over my face, unreadable yet devastatingly direct. This was not a passing look. This was a man choosing a target. I couldn't will myself small enough. He extended his arm toward me, not vaguely, not politely, to me, like it was the most natural thing in the world. A dozen conversations around us halted mid-sentence. Glasses stopped midair. The music faltered for half a beat. My pulse stuttered. "Your Majesty," I whispered, shaking. I don't think." He bent slightly, lowering his face toward mine, close enough that I felt the warmth of his breath against my cheek. Close enough that my wolf pressed desperately against my skin, begging for more. His voice came soft, deep, threaded with a command I felt, not heard. "Stay close," he murmured. "You're with me tonight." My heart slammed into my ribs. The words crashed through me, shattering every boundary I'd spent years building. I stared up at him, unable to speak, unable to breathe, unable to accept that he meant what I thought he meant, that he meant me. Gasps rippled around the hall. People turned, heads snapped toward us. My mother's jaw dropped open. My sister's face twisted in something between shock and jealousy. "Who is she?" someone whispered. "Why her?" Another hushed. "An Omega? That Omega?" The Alpha King ignored all of them. He held his arm out again, an invitation no one refused. When I didn't move right away, he did something unthinkable. He stepped closer, lowering his voice so only I could hear. "I won't repeat myself," he murmured. "Take my arm." My fingers trembled as I lifted my hand. When my skin brushed his sleeve, something surged between us. Heat, electricity, recognition, like a lock clicking into place. The sensation made my breath hitch, made his pupils dilate. He guided my hand into the crook of his arm with a touch so firm yet careful it startled me. Then he turned toward the center of the hall, and he led me forward. Through the parted sea of nobles, past shocked faces, past my sister's frozen smile and my mother's horrified stare, past every person who had ever overlooked me, stepped around me, laughed at me. They bowed as he passed. And I, somehow, walked beside him, beside the Alpha King. He guided me toward the high table, toward a seat reserved for the most powerful wolves in the kingdom. The hall fell into a stunned silence. I sat. He sat beside me. He did not look away from me once. Shock, disbelief, confusion, awe. It all tangled in my chest until I could barely hold myself upright. I wasn't invisible anymore, not to him. And the terrifying, intoxicating truth settled like fire in my blood. The Alpha King had chosen me. And nothing about tonight would ever be the same. If I thought sitting beside the Alpha King was the peak of humiliation or wonder, I was wrong. The night was only just beginning to unravel me. The musicians shifted into the first dance melody, that soft rise of strings that told every couple in the hall to prepare. This dance was tradition, ceremony, symbolic. Only the most important figures were invited into the center circle. Certainly not me. I curled my fingers in my lap, determined to be invisible again. Surely the king would dance with a noblewoman, an ally, a duchess, someone deserving. But then his chair scraped softly against the marble, and he stood. His shadow fell over me before I registered he had moved. "Lyria," he said, my name, spoken like a secret only he knew. My heart tripped. He extended his hand into my line of vision. Steady, certain, far too sure of me. Every head in the hall turned. "No," I thought weakly. "No, no, no, not this. Don't do this to me." Your Majesty, surely someone else." My voice cracked. Kale stepped closer. His eyes glinted gold, not softly, not subtly. A warning to the world. "Give me your hand," he murmured. Something deep in me, something buried under years of dismissal and silence, rose like a trembling flame. Before I could smother it, my fingers lifted toward his. His touch was warm, firm, enveloping mine completely. A collective gasp rippled through the hall. He didn't lead me. He claimed me, guiding me toward the center of the ballroom with a certainty that terrified me and set my pulse racing. The circle parted as we approached, nobles stepping away as if pushed by an unseen force. Kale took his place. And then he pulled me close. Not respectfully, not formally, close enough that my breath tangled in his chest. Close enough that I felt the solid heat of him through my gown. Close enough that his scent, pine, cold air, wildfire, flooded my senses. His nose brushed the curve of my jaw as he inhaled, a slow, deliberate breath that made my knees soften. Gods. Wolves had sharper instincts, sharper urges, but I had never imagined the Alpha King would lower his face to mine, breathing me in like I was something vital. Steady, he murmured. But his voice didn't sound steady at all. It sounded strained, hungry. We began to move, his hand around my waist, the other clasping mine. He guided me effortlessly, like he'd been waiting to do this, like he knew exactly how my body would follow his. Whispers ignited around us like wildfire. Who is she? An Omega. I think her name is Lissa, something. Why her? Is he choosing her? My cheeks burned, but Kale didn't even flick an ear toward the noise. His attention was locked on me so intensely it felt like being held upright by it. You're trembling, he said quietly. Everyone is staring. I know. His thumb brushed my hip. I nearly stopped breathing. But they're staring because you're with me, he said, not the other way around. My throat tightened. No one had ever said something like that to me. No one had ever made me feel like being beside me was a privilege. The dance pulled us into a slow turn. His breath ghosted my ear. I noticed you long before you saw me, he murmured. I shivered. He felt it. His body stiffened, his hold tightening ever so slightly. Then something sliced through the moment like a blade. My sister. She swept toward us in a whirl of silk and glitter, smiling wide, beautiful, and triumphant. Your Majesty, she purred. May I cut in? Kale's hand slid from my waist to the small of my back, drawing me flush against him. The growl that left his chest was quiet, too quiet for humans, but every wolf in the hall heard it. A warning, a threat. My sister froze mid-step, her face draining of color. Kyle didn't look at her. Not once. He bent toward me instead, his voice low enough that only I heard. No one cuts in. My breath caught. His next words unfurled against my skin like heat. I'm not done holding you. The dance continued. Not perfectly. My steps faltered often. But he followed my movements as though every misstep was something he'd anticipated, as though he'd learned the shape of me long before tonight. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel invisible. I felt seen, exposed, claimed. And as the final notes of the song faded, Kyle didn't release me immediately. His fingers remained tangled with mine, his body still angled toward me, as if willing the dance not to end. When he finally stepped back, his gaze held mine a moment too long, a moment that promised the night was far from over. And I realized, terrifyingly, breathtakingly, that the Alpha King wasn't just noticing me, he was choosing me. The dance ended, but the feeling of being held did not. Even as Kale guided me back toward the edge of the ballroom, my body still remembered every place his hands had been. My waist, my back, my fingers. I tried to steady my breathing, to remind myself this wasn't real. He was the Alpha King. I was no one. A forgotten Omega from a minor house. A girl whose name even the servers struggled to recall. But his shadow never left mine. We stopped near a marble alcove, partially hidden from the crowd. Kale positioned himself just slightly in front of me, as though shielding me without saying the words. I tried to ignore how reassuring that felt. You're shaking, he murmured. I'm fine, I lied. His golden eyes flicked toward the tables across the hall. Something in his posture changed. His shoulders tensed, his body angled like a wolf readying to strike. Following his gaze, I saw them. Members of the Blackthorn Pack, their dark uniforms stark against the gold-lit hall. Their expressions were unreadable, but their eyes were fixed on me. Not Kale. Me. And not with curiosity. With calculation. Cold pricks danced up my spine. "Why are they looking at me?" I whispered. Kale's gaze sharpened. "Because they're fools," he said softly. "And dangerously mistaken if they think they can stare at you like that." "I'm no one," I said. His jaw tightened. "You're with me." His voice was low, edged with something that vibrated through my bones. I didn't have the courage to name it. Kale didn't look away from the Blackthorn wolves. His gaze tracked their movements with quiet, lethal precision. I'd heard stories of him hunting enemies with nothing but his claws, of wars ending because he walked into a room. Now that look, cold, deadly, was sparked by the way those wolves were looking at me. It made no sense. "Ignore them," I whispered. "I always do." His eyes snapped to mine, furious and startled all at once. "Always?" I swallowed. I shouldn't have said that. I looked down at my hands, twisting them together. "People look," I said quietly, "or stare, or whisper. It's not unusual." "But why?" he pressed. I forced a small, brittle smile. "Because I'm easy to overlook. Easy to dismiss." His brows drew together. "Who taught you that?" I gave a humorless laugh. "My father, mostly, and my mother, and my sister, and the nobles, and the servants." Each word felt like peeling off a layer of skin. Kale said nothing at first, just watched me with an expression that made my heart stutter. "Tell me," he said at last, voice low and rough, "who hurt you?" I shook my head immediately. "I'm not. This isn't. You don't need to know that." He stepped closer, close enough that I felt the warmth of him even through the layers of silk. His scent wrapped around me like a cloak, grounding and terrifying. "Lyria." My name again, softer this time. I asked who hurt you. "No one," I whispered. His eyes narrowed. "That's a lie. I don't want to burden you with—" "You won't," he cut in. "You couldn't." My breath caught. His voice was not angry, not at me, but there was heat, fire, an undercurrent of something primal. "Tell me," he repeated. I looked away. The words tasted like shame. "My family doesn't see value in me," I said finally. "I'm not politically useful. Not beautiful like my sister. Not strategic. Not powerful. So they don't consider me an asset." Kyle went still. Utterly, frighteningly still. "Say that again," he said. I flinched. "Please don't make me." "Lyria," he said, his voice darkening. "You think your worth is measured in usefulness?" "That's how alliances work," I murmured. His expression shifted, slowly, like a crack forming in stone. A shadow crossed his face, something fierce and wounded on my behalf. His hands curled into fists at his sides. "They call you a non-asset?" he asked quietly. "Yes." A growl vibrated in his chest, low, deadly, not human. "Killing them would be too merciful," he said under his breath. My mouth fell open. "Kale, Your Majesty, please don't. They belittled you." His voice was gravel. "Your own family belittled you." "Everyone does," I whispered. He looked at me like I'd just admitted a crime committed against the crown itself. "No," he said, and the word was a vow. "Not anymore." One of the Blackthorn wolves laughed across the hall. Kale's gaze cut toward him, predatory, sharp. The wolf stopped laughing. Fear hitched my breath, but not fear of him. Fear of the storm gathering behind his eyes, a storm taking shape because of me. "Stay near me," Kale said, and the command wasn't harsh. It was protective, instinctive. "I won't let anyone touch what's mine." I froze. I wasn't his. I couldn't be. But before I could form a single word, he said something that shattered whatever fragile distance I'd tried to keep. You will never be invisible again. I lasted another 20 minutes inside the ballroom before the weight of every stare began crushing my lungs. Kyle hadn't left my side once, not physically, but the attention gathering around us had become unbearable. Everywhere I looked, someone was whispering. Not about the bride, not about the groom, about me. A nobody. A mistake. A curiosity clinging to the Alpha King's arm. When another group of nobles turned their heads in unison to stare at me like I was a misbehaving child, my breath finally broke. I murmured something that might have passed as an excuse and slipped out one of the side doors. The night air was cool, scented with jasmine and wet stone. Moonlight washed across the palace gardens, softening the edges of everything. My shoulders sagged with relief. For a moment, I let myself breathe. Just breathe. Maybe if I stayed outside long enough, the court would forget I existed again. Maybe I could slip back into my usual invisibility, the one place I actually understood. But the garden wasn't empty. I felt him before I saw him. A nobleman, tall, broad-shouldered, someone from the northern border clans, stepped out from behind a cypress tree. His smile was slow, sharp, and wrong. "Running away already?" he drawled. I stiffened. I just needed air." "Air," he echoed, stepping closer. "Funny. Inside it looked like you were suffocating on your own delusions." I flinched. "Excuse me?" He laughed. "You really believe it, don't you? That the king gave a damn about you in there?" Heat pricked my eyes, but I held my ground. "I didn't say that. You didn't have to." His gaze swept over me in one cruel, dismissive line. "You think a girl like you matters? You think he'll remember your name by morning?" "That's enough," I whispered. "Is it?" he hissed. He embarrassed himself. "For you, a pathetic omega with nothing to offer." Tears burned behind my eyes. Gods, I hated crying. I hated that people like him could pull me apart with such casual cruelty. "Please," I murmured, "leave me alone." But instead of stepping back, he caught my wrist. Hard. Pain shot up my arm. My breath stuttered. "Let go." He leaned in, his grip tightening. "Wake up, girl. You are nothing. A joke dressed in silk." My wolf whimpered inside me, small and frightened. And then everything went still. A shift in the air. A drop in temperature. A pressure, heavy and lethal, settling over the garden like an unseen shadow. The noble's hand went rigid on my wrist. I felt the moment he sensed the danger behind him. Because I sensed it too. Kale. He stepped into view like he had risen straight from the darkness. No footsteps, no warning. Just sudden presence, raw, predatory, and terrifyingly calm. His eyes glowed gold, not flecks, not hints, full, burning gold. The noble paled. Your Majesty." Kale didn't speak. He just moved. One hand shot out, seizing the man by the back of his collar. He yanked him away from me with such effortless force that the noble staggered and choked. A growl, deep, primal, vibrated from Kale's chest. "If you ever touch her again," Kyle said, voice as low as thunder, "I'll rip out your throat." The noble froze. My king, Kale lifted him off his feet. Off. His. Feet. "Say one more word," Kale murmured, "and it will be your last." For a moment I thought Kale might actually kill him. His wolf was so close to the surface I could feel its rage rolling off him, thick and electric. "Kale," I whispered, barely audible. "Please, let him go." His eyes snapped to me, not softening exactly, but changing, widening, sharpening, protective, desperate, wild. He dropped the man. The noble scrambled backward, falling onto the stone pathway before scrambling to his feet and fleeing into the shadows. The garden fell silent except for the pounding of my heart. Kale turned fully toward me, and the anger on his face, the fury, melted into something else entirely. Concern. Fear. "You're hurt," he said, reaching for my wrist. "I'm fine," I whispered. "You're not." His fingers brushed the reddened skin where the noble had grabbed me. His touch was gentle, almost reverent. The contrast from moments ago made my vision blur. "I should have stayed with you," he said quietly. "You didn't know." "I should have known," he growled. The intensity of him made my breath shallow. He was still shaking, just barely, like restraining himself took everything he had. "Lyria," he breathed, lifting my wrist to his lips. I froze. He kissed the bruised skin slowly, deliberately. My chest tightened so sharply it felt like pain. "Anyone who threatens you," he whispered against my skin, "threatens me." My throat closed. "Why?" He lifted his head, eyes burning. "I don't have the answer yet," he said, "but I will." Moonlight wrapped around us silver and soft, and for the first time in my life, I felt safe. And terrified. And seen. All at once. Kyle didn't take me back inside the ballroom. He didn't even ask where I wanted to go. He simply wrapped his fingers, still trembling faintly, around my uninjured wrist and guided me through a stone archway and down a quiet walkway lined with burning lanterns. His steps were long, decisive, and silent. Mine were shaky. We stepped onto a small terrace overlooking the moonlit courtyard below. The sounds of the wedding floated faintly from the distant hall. Music, laughter, clinking glasses. But up here, everything felt still. Removed. Suspended. Kale stopped only when we reached the far balustrade. Then he released a slow breath, like he'd been holding his rage in his chest and could finally exhale. "Lyria," he said without turning around. "Look at me." I hesitated. He turned anyway. His eyes weren't gold anymore, but they weren't calm either. They held something sharper. Something that shouldn't have been directed at me, but wasn't entirely anger either. He closed the distance between us with a single step. "Tell me the truth," he said quietly. "About what? Why you flinch when someone raises their voice? Why you shrink when someone compliments you? Why you freeze when someone touches you? Why you walk like you're apologizing for taking up space?" I felt heat crawl up my throat. "I don't." "You do," he cut in, "and I want to know why." I turned away, gripping the marble railing. "It doesn't matter. It matters to me." Those 6 words hit deeper than anything else had tonight. "You shouldn't care," I whispered. He growled softly, impatient, frustrated. Not with me, with whatever answer he sensed, beneath my evasion. "I should," he said. "I do." I squeezed my eyes shut. "Lyria." His voice softened, dangerously so. "Tell me who made you feel small." My breath hitched. He wasn't asking out of curiosity. He was demanding it the way a storm demands to break open. I felt myself cracking under his gaze. "You wouldn't understand," I whispered. He stepped behind me, not touching, but close enough that warmth radiated across my back. "Let me try." I shook my head. "It's nothing dramatic. Not beating. Not violence." "Sometimes," he said quietly, "the deepest wounds don't bleed." My vision blurred. The moonlight wavered. The dam inside me trembled. "It's just—" The words scraped out of me. "I disappear easily. I always have." Kale didn't interrupt. I was the quiet child, the plain one, the omega in a family that wanted alphas and betas. My sister shined in every room. My parents praised her, and I blended into the background. He moved closer, silent as a night predator. "Everything she did," I murmured. "They celebrated. Everything I did, they barely noticed. I learned to step aside, to stay out of the way, to not expect anything." My throat tightened painfully. It wasn't cruelty exactly, I continued. Just constant forgetting, constant dismissal, like I was furniture. Something useful, not someone important. I let out a broken laugh. Even the servants forget to offer me wine. Kyle's breath hitched, a sound of fury held in restraint. And the nobles, I whispered. They don't bother mocking me anymore. They mock things that matter. I'm nothing. A tear slipped down my cheek before I could stop it. Kale reached out, slowly giving me a chance to pull away. I didn't. His fingers brushed my jaw, warm and reverent, tracing upward until his palm cupped my cheek. I gasped softly at the contact. He tilted my face up to him. His expression was carved from something raw and dangerous. "Lyria," he said, voice barely more than a growl, "you are not nothing." I swallowed hard. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." His thumb brushed away another tear. "I know the way you move. Quiet but not weak. I know the way your scent changes when you're hurt. I know the way your eyes light when you're startled. I know you feel things deeply and try to hide it. I know your heart is too big for the world you were raised in." My chest ached. No one had ever spoken about me like that. Then he leaned closer, his forehead nearly touching mine. "And listen to me," he whispered, each word its own pulse of heat. "No one ignores what's mine." Everything inside me stilled. "Mine?" I stared at him, stunned, breathless. You don't mean that," I whispered. His thumb stroked my cheek again. Slow, deliberate, possessive. "I do." The world blurred around the edges. I'd spent years teaching myself not to want, not to hope, not to imagine anything more than existence. But standing beneath the moonlight with Kale's hand on my face, for the first time, I felt wanted. Not tolerated. Wanted. And it made my heart tremble in my chest like a bird beating its wings for the first time. After Kale said those words, "No one ignores what's mine," the night changed. It wasn't sudden, not a sharp turn in fate, but a quiet shift. Like a breeze brushing the back of my neck. A knowing. A shiver. A promise. He stepped back only enough to look at me fully, his eyes searching mine with a question he didn't speak aloud. "Come with me," he said instead. I blinked. "Where?" "Away from all this." He jerked his chin toward the ballroom. Music still drifted faintly, laughter rising and falling like waves I never quite belonged to. The room felt far away already, but the idea of leaving it with him felt impossible. "Kale, the feast is still going." "The feast will survive without me." His mouth curved in a faint, almost dangerous smile. "I'm not interested in performing tonight." "Performing?" "For them." His jaw tightened. Then he added more softly, "I would rather be with you." My heart tripped on itself. Before I could gather a response, he offered his hand, not as a king commanding, but as a man asking. A small moment, but it undid me completely. I placed my hand in his. Warmth shot up my arm. He held me carefully, almost protectively, as he led me down the terrace steps and through a winding path behind the palace. Lanterns flickered overhead, but he moved like he didn't need light, like he knew the shadows as intimately as breath. We stepped through an archway of ivy, and the world opened into the moonlit training grounds, wide, quiet, empty. A space meant for strength and discipline. Yet under the silver glow, it felt softer, like a sanctuary. "Why here?" I asked. "Because no one follows me into the training yards at night," Kyle said. "And because—" He hesitated, then looked at me in a way that made my stomach twist. "Because you look like you need space to breathe." "I do," I whispered. The admission surprised us both. He guided me to the center of the field, where the moonlight pooled like water. Then he sat on one of the wooden barriers, casual, powerful, and nodded for me to join him. My pulse hammered as I sat, not close enough to touch, but close enough to feel him. For the first few moments, we said nothing. Then, quietly, Kale broke the silence. "Do you know what I hate most about being king?" I blinked. "Everyone fears you?" "Everyone expects from me," he corrected. "No one asks. No one wonders how I am. No one sees a man. Only a crown." His voice was low but weighted, like confessing it cost him something. "I'm surrounded by people," he said, "but I haven't felt understood in a long time." I swallowed. "I understand that feeling." He looked at me with a sharpness that wasn't hostile but startled, like he truly hadn't expected to hear something from me that resonated. I continued before fear could clamp my mouth shut. "I'm always surrounded by people too, but I might as well be invisible. I exist in the corner of every room, observing, quiet, forgettable. Sometimes I wonder if I'd vanish without anyone noticing." His head snapped toward me, eyes blazing. "I notice," he said, voice fierce. Heat bloomed under my skin. "I know," I whispered. "You've made that very clear." He exhaled slowly, like I'd touched a nerve. Then, more quietly, "I knew you the moment your scent reached me." My breath caught. "You." "What?" He turned fully toward me, knee brushing against mine in a barely there touch that sent sparks up my thigh. "You came into the ballroom late," he said, "dressed in blue, thinking no one saw you." I remembered that moment, slipping in quietly, hoping my lateness would go unnoticed. "But I did," he murmured. A shiver ran down my spine. "I was standing near the far wall," he said, listening to a dozen conversations at once, my wolf bored, my mind scattered. His eyes locked on mine. "Then your scent hit me. Soft. Wild. Something pure. Something I didn't expect to find in a den of schemers." My throat tightened. "The hall blurred," he whispered. "Every voice, every sound, every face." His hand lifted, hesitated, then brushed my hair back from my cheek with a tenderness that made my chest ache. "Only you stood out." I trembled. Not from fear, from the quiet, terrifying intensity in his voice, the sincerity, the weight of those words from a man who didn't waste them. "Kyle," I breathed. His hand lingered in my hair, fingertips warm against my scalp. "You think you're invisible," he said. But my wolf knew you instantly, recognized something I didn't have the words for yet. I felt like the air had turned to honey, thick, sweet, impossible to move through. What did he recognize?" I whispered. Kale leaned in just slightly, close enough to feel the heat of his breath against my cheek. "That you were meant to be seen," he said, "especially by me." The world tilted. My heart thundered. And somewhere deep inside, a place long ignored, long dimmed, something ignited like a spark finally catching flame. If the night until now had been a quiet shift, this was the moment the world tipped. Kale was close enough that I could feel his breath on my cheek, warm, unsteady. And when he spoke, his voice brushed over my skin like a touch. "Lyria," he murmured. "May I?" I froze, not from fear but from the shock of someone asking. No one ever asked me anything, not what I wanted, not what I preferred, not if I wanted to be touched or seen. But Kale asked. His forehead nearly touched mine as he waited. He didn't demand. He didn't assume. He waited. My heart thudded so loudly I was sure he could hear it. "What are you asking?" I whispered. His thumb brushed my jawline, feather light. "To touch you." His voice dropped lower. "To kiss you, if you'll let me." My breath hitched. No one had ever asked to kiss me. No one had wanted to. The idea that the Alpha King, the most feared wolf in the realm, was asking as though my answer carried weight. It felt unreal. I nodded. Barely. But he noticed. His breath caught, The faintest, sharpest sound, like a man trying not to lunge. Then he cupped my face with both hands. Slowly, reverently. His hands were warm, calloused, steady despite the tension rippling through his arms. His thumbs traced my cheekbones in delicate strokes, as though memorizing the shape of me. Lyria, he whispered, and my name had never sounded like that before. Like a vow, like a hunger barely contained. Look at me. I did. The moment our eyes met, something in the air cracked open. His gaze held desire. Yes, undeniable, raw. But beneath it, deeper, was something I had never seen directed at me. Awe. He leaned in, giving me every chance to pull away. I didn't. His lips touched mine with the lightest brush. Barely contact. Just a whisper of warmth. My breath stopped, suspended between us. He pulled back half an inch, eyes searching my face. If I go further, he said softly, I won't be able to pretend I don't want you. Something inside me broke open. Don't pretend. He exhaled, a low, shuddering sound, and then he kissed me again. Slowly, carefully, like I was something precious he didn't quite trust himself with. His mouth was warm and soft, but the restraint in the kiss, God's, the restraint, was the part that undid me. It was hunger trying to behave. It was desire forced into gentleness. His hand slid from my cheeks to cradle the back of my head, thumbs brushing behind my ears. Every movement was deliberate, controlled, meant to keep from overwhelming me. But inside that control was heat. A slow burn. A warning. A promise. My wolf, silent all my life, small and curled in the back of my ribs, stirred for the first time. A tiny spark, then a reach. A yearning toward him, toward this touch, toward being wanted. I gasped softly against his mouth. The reaction wasn't something I controlled. My wolf wanted closer, wanted him, needed him. Kale froze mid-kiss. He pulled back just enough to press his forehead to mine, breathing hard. You felt that? He whispered. I nodded, trembling. His hands tightened in my hair. Not to hurt, but because he was the one losing control now. Your wolf reached for mine, he said, voice thick with reverence and hunger. She wakes for me. I didn't know what that meant. Not really. But the look on his face, shocked, undone, made my heart race even faster. He kissed me again, deeper this time. Not rushed, not rough. Just more. More pressure. More heat. More truth. His mouth coaxed mine open gently, slowly, until I was kissing him back with a desperation I didn't know I had. A thrill ran down my spine when he groaned softly against my lips, like the sound had been dragged out of him. His hand slid down my spine, drawing me closer, guiding me into his heat, his strength. Every inch of me lit up. And then he tore himself away with a ragged breath, stumbling back a step like he'd nearly lost a battle. No, he gasped, shaking his head. If I keep going, I won't stop. I stood there panting, lips tingling, heart pounding against my ribs. Kale. He held up a hand, eyes locked on my mouth like it pained him not to return to it. Lyria, he said, voice hoarse, you have no idea what you do to me. The honesty in his voice struck me like lightning. But I won't take more than you're ready to give, he said. I want you too much for that. His restraint, his fear of losing control, should have frightened me. Instead, it filled me with warmth, with power, with something that felt dangerously like belonging. Because tonight, under the moonlit training grounds, everything changed. And we both knew it. I should have known the night wouldn't let me keep its warmth. Eventually, Kale walked me back toward the palace, slowly, reluctantly, as though each step back toward the world meant stepping away from whatever fragile, breathtaking thing had sparked between us. By the time we reached the outer hall, the music had softened into something distant and glittering. Laughter drifted through the arched doorway. I could already feel the shift, the way eyes would swing toward us the moment we stepped inside. Kale brushed his thumb across my knuckles, grounding me with a single touch. "You're not walking in alone," he said. It wasn't a suggestion. He led me through the doors, and like I feared, the entire ballroom turned to look. Whispers broke like ripples on water. "The king is back, and she's with him. Again." Where did they go? Why her? The heat rose to my cheeks. My steps faltered. Kyle tightened his hold on my hand. But even his steady presence couldn't stop what happened next, because waiting near the far wall, faces tight with barely contained fury, were my mother and sister. The moment they saw us, their expressions twisted. I knew what was coming before we even reached them. "Lyria." My mother's voice struck like a whip. A word. Kale stiffened, but I gently stepped forward. "It's okay," I whispered, though the tremble in my voice betrayed the lie. I approached my mother alone. Her eyes raked over me, my flushed cheeks, my disheveled hair, my hand still visibly trembling from Kale's kiss. Her lips curled. "You humiliated us tonight," she hissed. My stomach dropped. "I didn't. You dared to stand beside him." "You." Her voice sharpened to a blade. "Do you have any idea how foolish you looked clinging to the Alpha King, like some desperate stray?" I flinched. Mother didn't lower her voice. She wanted the room to hear. "As if you," she continued, "could ever be fit to stand beside a king." My sister stepped forward, arms crossed, face smug with cruelty. "Mother, don't waste your breath. Kyle was just being polite." Her smile was thin, poisonous. "He'll forget Lyria by morning." The words hit harder than they should have, because a small wounded part of me, so used to believing them, almost believed it now too. My chest tightened painfully. Maybe this was all some strange, brief kindness. Maybe the king had been swept up in the moment. Maybe by dawn he'd remember who he was, and who I wasn't. My vision blurred. I swallowed, trying to pull my hand from where Kale had held it, as if releasing myself from him would soften the humiliation. And then, a shadow fell over us. A presence. Heavy. Electric. Kale stepped in behind me, silent as a predator. But his power, it filled the air like a storm waiting to strike. My mother's eyes widened. My sister paled. Kyle's voice came from just behind my shoulder. Low, dangerous, perfectly controlled. "You will speak to her with respect." The hall went silent. Completely, utterly silent. My mother stuttered, Your Majesty, I didn't mean—" "You meant every word." Kale stepped beside me then, not just behind, beside, a clear message. "And you are wrong." My heart lurched. He turned fully toward my mother, expression carved from cold fury. "Lyria did not humiliate you," he said. "You humiliated yourselves by failing to see her worth." My mother's face drained of color. Your Majesty." He didn't let her speak. "And if you ever again imply she is unfit to stand beside me," he continued, voice dropping even lower, "you will answer for it." My sister tried to speak, but Kale's gaze snapped to her next, sharp enough to cut. "And as for you," he said, "if you dare belittle her again, if you so much as whisper something cruel about her, I will ensure every noble house knows precisely what kind of family mistreats their own." My sister's smug expression collapsed into stunned silence. Kale stepped closer to me then, so close the warmth of his arm brushed mine. He wasn't hiding it, he wasn't pretending, he was claiming, publicly, powerfully. He tilted his head down, voice softer, only slightly, when he spoke to me. "You owe them no explanation," he said. and no apology. My breath trembled out of me. "And you," he added, eyes burning now with something fiercely protective, "are not someone I will forget in the morning." For a moment I couldn't breathe. Not because of fear, because for the first time in my life, someone stood beside me. Someone defended me. Someone silenced the voices that had shaped my entire sense of worth. Someone chose me, and the whole court witnessed it. My mother stepped back. My sister lowered her eyes. The hall remained frozen, silent and watching. But Cale didn't look at them. He looked only at me. And when he spoke again, his voice was a vow meant for me alone. "You are not small, Lyria." His fingers brushed mine. "Not to me." I hardly slept. How could I, after the night Cale and I had? After the kiss that still lingered on my lips, warm and trembling? After he'd defended me, publicly, fiercely, against the people who had shaped my entire life in shadows? But as the moon sank and the sky began to pale, the warmth in my chest slowly gave way to dread. Because dawn meant reality. Dawn meant consequences. Dawn meant facing whatever Cale would do next, and whatever the world would say about it. By the time the first rays of sunlight spilled into the guest chamber, I'd already braided my hair 3 times, changed gowns twice, and paced so many circles across the stone floor the pattern was probably imprinted beneath my slippers. I wasn't summoned. I wasn't told where to be. But instinct pulled me toward the eastern battlements where voices, deep, clipped, sharp, gathered. Cale's generals, representatives from several noble houses, commanders of the border packs. They were all here for the wedding. But this was no celebration. This was a war council. I lingered near the archway, unsure if I should enter. Then Cale's voice cut through the dawn air, rich, resonant, unmistakable. "Before we begin, there is one matter I will address first." Dozens of heads turned toward him. Even from the doorway, I could feel the shift in atmosphere, anticipation sharp enough to sting. Cale stood in the center of them all, dressed in black armor etched with silver. His hair was tied back, his expression unreadable. Power clung to him like a second skin. And yet, when his gaze flicked toward me, just briefly, there was something softer beneath the steel, something only I had been allowed to see last night. The murmurs began immediately. "Is that the Ashwood girl? What is she doing here? The king brought her?" My stomach knotted. I stepped back, ready to leave. But Cale's voice stopped me mid-step. "Lady Lyria Ashwood," he said, loud enough for the entire battlement to hear, "will accompany me to Stormclaw Keep." The world went silent. Completely, utterly silent. My breath froze in my throat. My vision swayed. I had to grip the stone archway to steady myself. Accompany him? To Stormclaw Keep? That wasn't a casual invitation. That wasn't travel. That wasn't courtesy. It was a claim, a courtship, a symbolic mating proposal, equivalent to declaring before the realm that I belonged at his side. A dozen voices erupted at once. "Your Majesty, that is highly irregular. She is unranked. An Omega. She cannot be brought to the keep. The Stormclaw throne requires a Luna of political value. This is unprecedented. You can't be serious about her." Cale didn't react at first. He simply stood there, jaw tight, eyes forward, posture carved from authority. Then, a sound left him. A growl so low and violent the stone beneath our feet seemed to hum with it. Silence slapped across the battlement. Cale's gaze swept over them, cold as a winter storm. "I do not require your approval." One general stepped forward, braver or stupider than the rest. "Your Majesty, with respect, bringing a girl of no status to the keep is a political liability. The nobles will riot. The alliances will—" Cale's eyes began to glow. gold, burning, dangerous. The general swallowed his next words. Kale's voice dropped to something lethal. Lady Lyria is under my protection. A ripple of shock tore through the crowd. He wasn't done. Permanently. The last word landed like a blow, a declaration, a warning, a line drawn in blood. I felt the air leave my lungs. Permanently? He said it without hesitation, without shame, without fear of consequence, like it was already a settled truth, like he'd already chosen. The generals exchanged frantic glances. One dared to speak, voice shaking. Your Majesty, this decision will be seen as binding. Kale didn't blink. Good. My heart tripped violently. Binding. Permanent. Stormclaw Keep. I didn't understand the full weight of it. Not the political implications, not the future he'd just thrown us both toward. But I understood enough. He wasn't just protecting me anymore. He was claiming me. Not with a collar, not with a mark, not with force, but with choice, with public declaration, with a decision powerful enough to shift the political axis of the realm. Kale turned then, looking directly at me, the world blurred around the edges. Lyria, he said softly, but to everyone at once, prepare yourself. You leave with me at dusk. My breath caught. He wasn't asking, he was inviting, and somehow, impossibly, he was choosing me. I didn't know what waited for me at Stormclaw Keep, or what this meant for my future, or why fate had put me in the path of a king who smelled like winter and looked at me like I was a miracle he didn't trust the world with. But as Kale watched me, steady, certain, unyielding, I understood one thing. Whatever came next, I was no longer invisible. Not to him, not to the realm, not to myself. The palace was restless that night. I could feel it in the walls, in the tension knotting the air, in the hushed voices spilling behind closed doors. Word of Kale's announcement had spread like wildfire. I heard the whispers everywhere I walked. He's taking her to Stormclaw Keep? She's no one. How did she catch his eye? It must be a political ploy, or a temporary fascination. She won't last. Omegas don't survive in royal dens. Every voice was a ghost from my past taking on new shape. I kept my head down and walked faster, but each hallway felt narrower, each turn more suffocating. The palace was a maze of polished stone and gold, beautiful, yes, but frightening in its grandeur. I felt too small inside it, too out of place, and tomorrow, I would be taken somewhere even grander. Stormclaw Keep, Kale's home, Kale's seat of power, Kale's world, where decisions were carved into stone and alliances shaped borders, where Lunas were queens, where Omegas like me did not belong. By the time I reached the quiet corridor near the northern balcony, the panic I'd been swallowing all day finally broke through. I pressed my back against the cold stone and slid down until I was sitting on the floor, knees drawn up. My breaths came too fast, too shallow. What am I doing? Who do I think I am? Tears slipped down my cheeks before I even noticed I was crying. Silent and hot, each one carrying a different fear. What if he regretted choosing me? What if I ruined something important? What if I couldn't meet expectations I didn't understand? What if I became an embarrassment the moment we arrived? The last thought hit hardest. What if I became a burden? My sob was small, swallowed quickly, but the sound still echoed far too loudly in the empty hall. That's when I heard footsteps. Slow, deliberate, familiar. I wiped my face quickly, trying to stand before whoever it was rounded the corner. I failed. Kale appeared, dressed in simple black. No armor, no crown, no arrogance. Just a man walking through dimly lit corridors. The moment he saw me on the ground, his entire expression changed. The sharpness melted, the coldness cracked. He crossed the distance in 3 strides, kneeling in front of me before I could even breathe. "Lyria," he murmured, hands hovering but not touching yet. "What's wrong?" I shook my head, trying to swallow the panic, trying to be composed. "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." "Don't apologize." His voice came out soft, urgent. "Not to me. Never to me." That only made the tears fall faster. He reached out slowly, giving me the chance to pull away. I didn't. His hands cupped my face, warm against my chilled skin. His thumbs brushed my tears away, gentle as moonlight. "Talk to me," he whispered. I tried, the words tangled in my throat, tight and painful. "Kyle, I don't belong in your world," I whispered at last. "I don't want to embarrass you. I don't want to be a mistake." His breath hitched sharply. A muscle in his jaw tightened. Then he leaned closer, lowering his forehead to mine, grounding me with the simplest, most intimate gesture he possessed. "You," he said slowly, "could never embarrass me." I shook my head weakly. "But why me? You could have anyone. Any alpha daughter, any noblewoman, anyone who knows how to stand in courts or speak in councils or—" "Stop." His voice trembled, not with anger, but with something deeper. "Lyria, look at me." I forced my eyes, open. Cale's gaze was raw, unshielded, honest. "Do you want to know why it's you?" he asked. My throat tightened. "Yes." He cupped my cheeks more firmly, like he needed the contact to stay steady. "Because," he said, voice low and reverent, "I've spent years surrounded by power, beauty, and noise, and you're the only one I couldn't stop looking at." My breath broke. "I noticed you the moment you walked into that ballroom," he continued. "Not because you demanded attention, not because you tried to shine, but because you were quiet in a way that drew me, real in a way no one else was." His thumb traced my lower lip gently, reverently. "In a court full of wolves showing their fangs," he murmured, "you stood there trying to disappear, and yet you were the only one my eyes kept returning to." A sob caught in my throat, part relief, part disbelief. "Cale." He pulled me into his arms, not fierce, not possessive, just holding me. A quiet embrace in a quiet corridor. His scent wrapped around me, warm and steady. His hand cradled the back of my head as if I might break. "You are not a burden," he whispered into my hair, "and you are not a mistake." I clung to him, shaking. He tightened his arms around me. "Come with me tomorrow," he said, voice soft but resolute. "Not because you think you owe me anything, not because you're afraid to say no. Come because I want you there." I closed my eyes. For the first time, the fear loosened its grip. "Okay," I breathed. His exhale trembled with relief. He pulled back just enough to look at me, brushing a final tear from my cheek. "Lyria," he whispered, voice thick with emotion, "I choose you. Not the crown, not the court. You." And for the first time in my life, I believed I could be chosen. Dawn crept up on us before I was ready. I hadn't slept. Not after Cale found me in the corridor, not after he held me until the fear inside me quieted. We didn't part for hours. We simply sat there, leaning against the cold stone wall, wrapped in each other's silence. Safe, seen, chosen. But dawn meant it was time. Time to leave the palace. Time to face the court. Time to ride beside the most feared alpha in the realm, publicly. He met me in the same corridor where he'd found me crying. Only now, the light coming through the windows painted him in warm gold instead of silver shadow. He looked like a man carved from power and winter. But when his eyes landed on me, his whole expression softened in a way I still didn't understand, but craved. "Lyria," he murmured. Just my name. But from him, it felt like a vow. I'm ready, I whispered. He stepped toward me, stopping only when he stood close enough that I felt the warmth of his breath against my cheek. His presence wrapped around me like a second skin, protective, sure, steady. Before we leave, he said softly, there is something I want to give you. My heart stumbled. Give me? He lifted his hand slowly, giving me time to refuse. I didn't. His fingers brushed my wrist. Just a touch, gentle, reverent, and heat bloomed under my skin. Then he lifted my hand fully into his. You're walking into my territory, he said, voice low. It is my duty to ensure you enter it protected. I swallowed. Kyle, I don't need... You do. His gaze locked on mine, intense, unwavering. Not because you are weak, but because wolves will challenge anything that is unclaimed. The word settled into my chest like a weight and a warmth all at once. Unclaimed. He lifted my wrist higher, his thumb pressing into the inside where my pulse fluttered wildly. Then he murmured something under his breath. A word I didn't recognize, ancient and heavy with power. His other hand glowed faintly, warmth gathering at his palm. A moment later, he traced a symbol onto my skin with deliberate, controlled strokes. It felt like fire and ice all at once, like the mark wasn't ink, but energy sinking into me. A shape formed, a sigil made of curling lines and sharp points, glowing gold against my pulse. I gasped. It's temporary, Kale said, voice a whisper against my ear. A protection rune. I stared at the bright mark shimmering on my skin. It's beautiful. It's mine, he corrected, gently tipping my chin up so I met his gaze. And now it's on you. My breath trembled. He lowered his mouth to my wrist, slow, deliberate, reverent. His lips brushed the glowing sigil, sending warmth spiraling up my arm, across my chest, into my throat. A soft sound escaped me before I could swallow it. He heard it. His eyes darkened. But instead of kissing me again, gods, I could feel the tension in him wanting that. He pressed one final kiss to my pulse and whispered, "Stay close." The words vibrated against my skin. "You're with me now," he continued, voice deep, warm, possessive in a way that made my knees weaken. "And always. Always. Not for tonight. Not for a moment. Always." Something inside me, something wounded, something small, something that had curled tight for years, finally unfurled. For the first time, I believed him, truly believed him. He straightened, lifting my marked wrist between us. The sigil glowed brighter, responding to his proximity, his wolf, his claim. "It reacts to the one who placed it," he said quietly. "It reacts to you," I breathed, his lips curved. "Yes." Just then, hooves clattered in the courtyard below. Voices rose, guards saddling horses, generals gathering, more whispers spreading through the palace like wildfire. "He's bringing her? Did you see the mark on her wrist? That's not a court token. That's an alpha sigil. Stormclaw Keep will riot." "He's made his choice." Kale heard them, but he didn't look away from me. He offered his arm. "Ride with me," he said, not behind him, not in a carriage, with him. I slid my hand into his. He led me down the steps, and the moment we emerged into the courtyard, every voice fell silent. Every head turned, every whisper hitched. Kyle helped me onto his horse, strong, black, restless. But it calmed the moment I settled in front of him, as though sensing his intent. Kale mounted behind me, his arm curling around my waist, his chest warm against my back. Before the gates opened, he lowered his mouth to my ear one last time. "Look at the horizon," he whispered. "That is your future now." The gates creaked open. Gasps filled the air. We rode out together. And though whispers chased us down the road, The glowing mark on my wrist, warm, alive, reminded me of what I'd become. Not invisible, not forgotten, not small, chosen. And for the first time in my life, I felt like I truly belonged beside someone, beside him. Stormclaw Keep was nothing like I imagined. It wasn't the cold fortress the court whispered about. It wasn't a place carved only for warriors or kings. It was wild stone and wind, packed earth and moonlit cliffs. It was a home shaped by strength, but softened by loyalty. A kingdom built on discipline but pulsing with life. And somehow, unbelievably, it had become my home too. Weeks had passed since Kale brought me through the iron gates. Weeks since the nobles whispered themselves breathless over my presence. Weeks of training yards echoing with clashing steel, war councils murmuring strategy, endless duties of a ruler's life unfolding before me. Yet through all of it, Kale never let me drift. Not into fear, not into doubt. Not into the shadows where I once lived. Every morning he found me. Every evening he walked me back to my chambers. Every night he whispered something that made my heart feel like it belonged to my own body for the first time. Tonight was the first royal gathering held since my arrival. A hall full of alphas, betas, nobles, generals, emissaries, faces that once would have crushed me simply by looking my way. But I wasn't the invisible girl anymore, and I wasn't standing alone. Kale stood at my side, broad shoulders draped in the royal mantle, crown gleaming like captured moonlight. His arm brushed mine, steady and warm. The entire hall stretched before us, stone pillars, soaring banners, flickering torches, but all I could feel was the quiet certainty of him beside me. A hush fell when the herald struck his staff. "Presenting," he called, His Majesty Kale Stormclaw, Alpha King, and Lady Lyria Ashwood. The hall bowed, not to Kale, to us. My breath hitched. I felt it, the awe, the dread, the disbelief rippling through the crowd. It wasn't cruel this time, it wasn't mocking, it was stunned acceptance. And just behind it, respect. My mother would faint if she saw this. My sister would choke on her jealousy. I stood straighter. A murmur drifted across the room, soft but unmistakable. I didn't know who said it, but the whisper curled like warm smoke through the hall. The invisible girl became the king's mate. My heart clenched. Kale heard it too. He leaned down, his presence brushing against my shoulder, his mouth close enough that his breath warmed the shell of my ear. "Lyria," he murmured, voice low enough for only me to hear. "Look at them." I did. Dozens of powerful wolves, some older than kingdoms themselves, bowing. To me. "Do you know what I see?" he asked. I swallowed. "What?" "You," he said, his voice rich with fierce pride. "Exactly as you always were. They're just finally seeing it too." My throat tightened painfully. I hadn't cried in days, but the urge rose sharp and sudden behind my eyes. He stepped even closer, just enough that his arm brushed against mine deliberately, not by accident, not for propriety, but as a quiet claim. He wanted everyone to see. "You still think you were invisible," he murmured, "but you were only surrounded by people who refused to look." I closed my eyes, bracing myself against the wave of emotion. Then he turned fully toward me. His hand brushed the inside of my wrist, right where the temporary sigil had once glowed before it faded days later. My skin remembered that heat. My pulse stumbled beneath his touch. His thumb stroked that spot gently, reverently, and he whispered, "Not invisible. Never again." Something inside me loosened, so slowly, so gently, I almost didn't notice the shift until I exhaled and the breath didn't hurt anymore. Never again. Never. I opened my eyes. The hall, the nobles, the torches, the banners. Suddenly none of it frightened me. None of it felt too big for me, too sharp for me, too bright for someone who had spent her entire life in the back corner of rooms. Because I wasn't standing behind anyone now. I was standing beside a king. And being chosen didn't make me smaller. It made me more myself. I looked up at Kale, at the man whose presence filled a room without effort, whose loyalty could shake kingdoms, whose tenderness was something he never gave lightly. He smiled, soft and devastating at once, his eyes glowing faintly under the torchlight. And for the first time in my entire life, I didn't flinch from being seen. I smiled back, fully, freely, openly. "What?" he asked quietly, amused by the warmth in my gaze. I lifted my chin, heart unsteady but sure. "I'm not afraid anymore." He exhaled, a soft, relieved sound, as though those words mattered more to him than the bowing crowd, the titles, the crown, the kingdom. His hand found mine and threaded our fingers together. And just like that, the girl no one noticed became the woman everyone bowed to. The invisible Omega became the Alpha King's bride. The forgotten daughter became the chosen queen of Stormclaw Keep. Kale squeezed my hand. "Come," he murmured. "Walk with me." I did. Not behind him. Not in his shadow. Beside him. Where I belonged.